In public with Zain. Welcome, Zain.
Hey,
Mhm.
how's it going, DK?
Standard care. So the first time I heard about standard care was just on a spreadsheet. I looked on your LinkedIn and it's not there. So this is very, very new, right? Hot off the press.
Yeah, hot off the press. I haven't talked about this publicly at all yet, outside of friends and family. So pretty excited to
Oh,
tell people about it.
well, yeah, we'll get into that. I think to sort of I think set some context or kind of just rewind the clock on kind of I think we met. I want to say like 10 years ago. Was it something?
Probably more than that. Probably closer to
Maybe.
12. Man, you've been in my life pretty much my whole
Wow.
adult life.
That's crazy. So I
No.
remember hanging out as part of Movity,
Mhm.
right? Over on the Embarcadero. You guys had this like amazing office with like lots of windows and glass and kind of bay views.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Pier 38. That's where Instagram was founded.
that's right. That's right. That's right. Were you guys in the like the kind of the not the upper deck section, but kind of the WordPress
Yeah.
floor,
Automatic, that
Optimatic
section.
floor? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was, yeah. So there was a co-working space upstairs. We had
Right.
our own offices downstairs, so we didn't have to interact with, all the
Right.
plebs building Instagram.
That's funny. And so that was real estate movity, and then I think uh, later you guys got to work together again at Open Door, right?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
what was that transition like? What was the story there?
Yeah, it was really cool actually. We obviously kept in touch, but we kind of had like a bit of a low lull, Eric and I, in our relationship between, when I left Trulia and then when I joined Open Door, and actually a little bit before Open Door. It was just one of those things where, you go apart and then you come back together.
Yeah.
And that was a time when I grew a lot. It was my early 20s. And when you have kind of a reasonable success in your early 20s, you kind of get this really big head. And so I spent, the middle of my 20s thinking about what I wanted out of life and what's good and what's bad. But yeah, eventually came back together. Even before Eric founded Open Door, we were hacking on stuff together. We did a little Airbnb related project together. And then
Was
he
this
founded Open
beyond
Door.
stays?
Yeah, Beyond Stays,
Okay.
exactly. Yeah, so that's actually a really cool project. It was Eric and Andrew, who's another
Yeah.
Movity guy, came to me and they were like, "Listen, we want to build a pricing engine for Airbnbs so that you could price Airbnbs like how hotel rooms and airline flights are priced." I was like, "That's a cool idea." This was before Airbnb had their smart pricing.
Hmm.
So really quickly in a weekend, we hacked together a pretty simple pricing engine that was like, okay, weekends should be more expensive. Holidays should be more expensive. Days that
Hmm.
there are conferences in town, should be more expensive. And at the time, I was running a hostel out of my home. I was one of the top Airbnb hosts in San Francisco. So I was my own customer for quite a
Yeah.
while.
And
But
were you
yeah,
also there was, if I recall, I know maybe a little too much inside baseball on this, but there was like this pricing thing was one thing, but then there was Beyond Stays, which was kind of a turnkey, like we'll manage your Airbnb for you. Is that right? So were you also
yeah.
using the Beyond Stays service or?
Well, so the idea with Beyond was we build a pricing engine and then we use that pricing engine ourselves. We just take over people's Airbnbs and we do full service. So like the
Oh, I
pricing
see.
engine actually wasn't even going to be public. Uh, it turns out the unit economics of that didn't really work out. But yeah, the purpose of that, it was a little bit different than what my hostel was. My hostel was kind of a passion project versus
Hmm.
the goal of Beyond Stays was to bring on new inventory that it didn't want to deal with the hassles of running an Airbnb. My hostel was the opposite. It was I wanted every little bit of running that Airbnb to meet the cool
Right,
people that came by.
right, right. And there was also, I remember around that time, there was this idea floating around of kind of like the Starwood brand on top of Airbnb. So
Mhm.
was that stuff that you guys talked about a lot, or was that just kind of
Mhm.
like a tangential concept that was raised?
Yeah, absolutely. I think these days Airbnb has done a pretty good job of doing it in house with Airbnb Plus and Lux and all of that. But yeah, that was the original idea. It was to give people a trusted brand so that when they went into an Airbnb, they knew what to expect. They knew that the quality would be high. Kind of reduce some of the gambling that comes when booking an Airbnb.
Hmm. That's cool. And so that kind of what was sort of the transition, and sort of how did from there we get to what is today's standard care? Was there an experience you had along the way that sort of was informative, or?
For sure, yeah. Standard care is nowhere close to that. Actually, it's in the healthcare space, amazingly enough. And yeah, like you said, I worked in real estate technology my whole life. From Movity to Trulia to Lovely to RentPath to Open Door. Like my entire resume is just real estate stuff. Right. But about 3 years ago, my mom was diagnosed with a pretty serious illness in the Parkinson's family called multiple system atrophy. And over the last 3 years, I've been helping her navigate the healthcare system here in the United States. There's no cure for MSA. There's only things you can do to alleviate some of the symptoms. And, as someone that's pretty well connected, as someone that knows how to work the system, even then it was really, really hard. And, if my mom was alone, English is her second language. She's quite tenacious, but imagine if she wasn't, I think her care journey would have been a lot different. So at some point I kind of felt like it was irresponsible for me not to be working on improving that system. So I decided to shift over from real estate into healthcare.
Mm-hmm. And what does that mean? Like, how do you sort of impact that system? Is it like a technology, or is it like a workflow system, or like a communication tool, or how should we think about like some of the pieces here?
Yeah. Super easy. I mean, healthcare is famously easy industry to break into and change.
Just show up and build an app, right?
Yeah. It's all a technology problem, nothing else. There's a lot. I think understanding the space is kind of step one. I think it's really common for founders to come into healthcare and be like, oh, why is this way? Like, we should just fix it. We should just change it. When the reality is, I think the web of incentives and the web of players in healthcare is more dense and more complicated than any other industry in the world. I think real estate is a number two, but very distant number two in that. So yeah, I think understanding the incentives and then figuring out how within the existing incentive structures you can actually make a difference, or how can you really change the incentives from ground up. I kind of came in, thinking, starting from first principles and thinking like, what is the world that I want in healthcare? And then, toning that down to 10% or 1% of what is actually accomplishable here, and starting to hammer away at that.
And what are
like when you were first learning about the space, kind of having never worked in it before, obviously from like personal experience, helping your mom navigate the system, but what kinds of things were you turning to just figure out like where the holes were and what you wanted to work on?
Yeah, everything was informed by what I was helping my mom with. So my mom, struggled with a lot of big questions like, having a terminal disease. What can I do to improve my quality of life? What can I do to help with these symptoms? Actually, day one, really the question is, what is my diagnosis? My mom was between a couple of diagnoses in the class of what's called Parkinson's plus, which is Parkinson's disease, but more aggressive, more quickly moving. And we had no idea which of those diseases it was. Now we have a little bit of a better idea. But yeah, starting with the diagnosis, getting a second opinion. Sure, there's no cure, but what are the things I can do to take over the counter? What can I get prescriptions for to improve this? MSA is kind of a crazy disease. Someone once described it to me as like, you're on a ship or you're looking at a dam and like there's a hole with water coming out, and you stick your finger in that, and then three more open up, and you stick your fingers in those, and like another one opens up, and you're just constantly playing that game. So like, how do you optimize for the things that come up?
Yeah, and you're imagining that for like all sorts of different situations where people could just, instead of spending hours and like probably a lot of pain going through figuring out what these different diagnoses, options are, what do people ask for, and second opinions, all of that sort of being streamlined into one place. Like,
yeah, exactly. And this is an experience I think anyone that has had a serious illness will have. Yeah, if you ask 5 doctors what therapies you should take, you'll get 12 answers. Yeah. And ultimately it's the patient's responsibility and to figure out what it will work for them, what they want to try, what their risk tolerance is. And all of that is on the patient, but the patient is really looking to their doctor for that, and their doctor may not have the same incentives that the patient does. The doctor they care about improving the patient's quality of life and curing their illness, but they also care about the paperwork that they have to do. They also have to care about malpractice lawsuits. They also care about the 12 other patients that they're going to see today with equally serious illnesses. Like, all of these things make me feel like doctors are tasked with way too many things, and patients want to take on some of those responsibilities, but they may not have the ability to. So that was kind of my North Star. Like, how do I take therapies and that patients want and let them get them without needing to go through this gatekeeper of a doctor?
So how does that look like in practicality? Step one is, I hear some shades of things where it sounds like you were helping your mom almost as a consultant, or some sort of like an advisor or coach. And then I think there's some things you say that sound like they're getting, I don't know if you're talking about like a new type of provider itself or some mix of those. How do you think about what is kind of the starting point here?
Yeah, totally. So concretely, the first tiny little bite that I'm trying to bite off here is, are you guys familiar with the idea of expanded access at all?
No.
So expanded access is a pathway for seriously ill patients to get access to therapies, drugs that are in trials, if there is a reason to. Basically, if you have a serious disease, if you're going to die, and there's a possible cure in phase 3 trials, but it's not approved yet, there's little downside to you trying it and a lot of upside. It could actually help. Mm-hmm. So the government has put forth a couple of different ways to get into expanded access. And very few people know about these things. Even when they do, and this is my experience with my mom, for MSA, there's a phase 3 trial for a drug called verdiperstat, but it has been a nightmare getting her access to that under expanded access, because every single doctor that we talk to, candidly, doesn't want to do the paperwork. It's a lot of work, and they don't get paid extra for it. So every single doctor has been really, really reticent to do that. So yeah, step one here is I want to expand access to expanded access programs, make it a little bit easier for patients that raise their hand and say, I want access to this drug, to actually help them get that drug.
And is most of the expanded access challenge around the paperwork that you mentioned, or is it even just is there some lack of discovery or library, or what is available to who and what's coming? How does that look?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about web of incentives. There's a lot. So there's a handful. The first one is, like you said, awareness. Most patients don't know what clinical trials are available to them. There's a crazy stat in oncology. I don't remember the exact numbers, but it's on the order of 85% of cancer patients would like to be in a trial for their condition, but less than 16% of them are aware that a trial exists for their condition. The numbers are pretty stark.
Wow.
Between those two. So yeah, first one is awareness. Just being aware that there exists a drug would be huge. Then the next step is getting access to that drug, whether it's through the normal front door pathways of, I want to be in this clinical trial, or there's the back door of expanded access programs. If the pharma company already has an expanded access program, there's the hoops you have to jump through. There's the paperwork your physician has to do. And then step 3, this is the hardest one, and this is the one that I'd like to change the most, giving incentives for pharma companies to actually have expanded access programs. Today, a number of them do, but it's far from the majority because they don't really have a reason for it. They have little upside. Mm-hmm. The upside is, doing it out of the goodness of their heart, or doing it for good press, really kind of soft things. But the downside, it exists. They are scared of people dropping out of the formal trial, because in the formal trial, there's a chance you get the placebo, but if you go through expanded access, you get the drug. There's a chance that their approval from the FDA could be risked. I mean, if someone under expanded access, has some crazy side effect that's unexplained, there's some risk there that the official FDA approval could have some risk there. So the pharma companies don't have the incentive to really offer expanded access programs right now. And it doesn't matter because patients don't really know about it anyway. And that doesn't matter because their physician probably won't let them do it anyway.
And so is this problem, is it something, the whole expanded access category, is that something that's fairly new, like just kind of is becoming more mainstream right now as a technique, either from pharma or from providers or individual patients?
It is, yeah. So it's a law from a couple years ago that actually made this even possible. And then just general public awareness is starting to spread, largely because we have so many of these uncured diseases that have possible cures on the horizon. ALS is a good example of this. There was just a huge campaign over the last month or so for a lady named Lisa who had a form of ALS that had a drug in trials that's effectively a cure for her disease. But it was in phase 3 trials. She was diagnosed like 2 days after the clinical trial stopped recruiting, and the pharma company didn't have an expanded access program. So basically, she was out of luck. She's like, there's a drug right here that could help me. I'm going to die if I don't get this drug, but like we need to go through this rigmarole to make sure that it's safe so that she doesn't die, but she can't even get the drug, so she's going to die. So there's a big social media campaign. It was like hashtag, what was it? I forget the hashtag now, but if you search for ALS Lisa, you'll find the whole campaign. And over the course of a month or so, they actually managed to put enough pressure on the pharma company that the pharma company agreed to have an expanded access program. Wow. Entirely by this one person's efforts. Pretty amazing.
So if you're successful with standard care, maybe part of what you would do is you'd be able to sort of shine more light or kind of bring more attention to this as a viable option for people. Is that
exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Step 1 is making them aware. Step 2 is helping them get it. And then step 3 is leveraging that to have pharma companies have more of these programs.
Right. And is this is this kind of structured as like a commercial service, or is this like are there other kind of forms that this thing could take? Or how do you think about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't really know yet. I'm still very early on in this journey. Yeah, I think I'm kind of focused on the step 1 there. Are there even enough patients that would care about this? There's a chance that it's really the like tiny percentage of people like me and my mom that are super active about their disease that like even care about this. The kind of grim truth is that we don't have cures on the horizon for most diseases, and the diseases that we do have phase 3 trials for, like for the most part, they are kind of minor drugs to help the disease, not really dramatically change the direction. And the truth is, if you're diagnosed with a terminal illness, a lot of times you don't care about, kind of digging for that 1% chance. You care more about spending time with your family, making most of the time you have left. So yeah, it's possible that actually nobody really wants to be part of expanded access programs. But in case they do, I want to make sure that they have a pathway for it.
Yeah. How do you go about finding out who they might be? And there's just like so many interlocking pieces that you just described. So like, what is your approach to even like pulling out the right people and the right options for them and then putting it all together?
I am kind of going off of my own journey, which is, I used to Google for MSA treatments. I used to Google for MSA trials. There's a website called clinicaltrials.gov run by the government, which is a de facto listing of every clinical trial running in the United States. But it's really hard for a layperson to understand it. So the first thing I'm doing is creating a similar website, but meant for laypeople, meant for patients to be able to understand what drugs are in trials. And going from there. If that is successful, then, the same people that were searching for the things I was searching for will find the website, will sign up for updates, will kind of have that nugget of hope that, maybe there is something on the horizon. And then I can convert those people into actually helping them get access to it.
Yeah.
And so clinicaltrials.gov is a government-built website. Is it run? Who runs it? Or did you mention?
I believe
agencies, or
might be NIH. I'm not 100% sure. But yeah, nearly every single clinical trial in the United States, the investigator of that trial will post it to clinicaltrials.gov and will update clinicaltrials.gov when they have an update.
So that's kind of from the research side. So are those mostly are they private research or public research, kind of institutions and things?
Both. Yeah, both. It's pretty much anything that's in trials.
And what does the process look like when somebody would submit something to trial? Is there, I guess, some lead time before it is available for expanded access, or how does the timing work there?
Yeah, it's all over the board. I mean, even for something to show up in clinicaltrials.gov, there's a lag time. They're not required to, always keep it up to date. So a lot of it is honestly people emailing the investigators and saying like, "Hey, I have this disease. Can you give me some information about it?" But yeah, basically the once something is on clinicaltrials.gov, it may or may not have an expanded access program already, and it may or may not have an expanded access program in the future. It's really something you got to figure out yourself for a particular clinical trial that you're looking for.
Right. It sounds like this expanded access thing is really core to both like the experience you had and kind of the step one for what you want to build with standard care. Is there, but you also mentioned that like there might be the risk that like there's not enough appetite or interest or awareness or the right sets of drugs that would map to people's kind of interests here. So if you were to find that out, that there wasn't enough, do you feel like the core concept of what you're trying to achieve to help improve care, are there sort of different approaches to it, or are you kind of saying you want to just make the expanded access thing work and just going to kind of push to figure out the right way to make that work?
No, the expanded access stuff is really my first hypothesis. And, it's me looking for a wedge into the kind of grander idea of, I think patients should have control over their own care and they should understand their care options. So to kind of zoom out from the wedge, I imagine this growing into you type in your disease and we'll give you every single care option you have, whether that's approved therapies that are over the counter, approved drugs that are available through prescription. We can help you get that prescription. Things that are in trials that could help your particular form of this disease. Digital therapies are, kind of huge. Things that are on the cutting edge, if you have PTSD or depression, things like psychedelic therapy is on cutting edge. Like being able to understand all of that in one place and have it be backed up by studies and backed up by science. That's kind of the end vision. And then, the idea of, one click to get access to it is a very appealing one.
Right. Because the reason I'm curious is you mentioned kind of how I don't know if this is the right way to frame it, but I think you kind of act as an advocate with your mother. And I think I've noticed this same kind of behavior in my own family. My father had a terminal illness, and we're fortunate my brother's a physician, so he kind of knows how to work the system. And I could not imagine, getting through what we got through without everything going back to my brother and letting him say, no, we're not going to take that slow path. We're going to take this path. Let's get this scheduled. Let's go talk to this person. And just his like knowledge of how to be an advocate, even though he wasn't the functioning physician for my father, he was like a strong advocate in pushing the process and pushing things to get scheduled and pushing us to consider the alternatives and learn about it. So it sounds like you were, kind of adopting this same role. And so I wonder, is that role, in a sense, it's a little bit more of an abstract thing, that may serve across expanded access, but may actually serve other functions too. Is there something there that is worth exploring? Is that something you're excited about?
Absolutely. That is exactly the role I played. And that's exactly the role I want to not have to exist anymore. Like I want that to be easily done by the patient themselves or whoever their caretaker is, right? Like it shouldn't take a physician in the family. It shouldn't take, an entrepreneur in the family that's used to jumping over hurdles. It should be accessible to every single person. And that's exactly what my end goal is here. And like everything, it's about, finding that wedge, finding that first bite to get to that, because that's kind of a big problem.
Right. So, it sounds like there's a lot of the thinking so far is around trying to solve what may be ultimately a purely information problem. And you can have like a nice search engine, you search for a thing and it has all the different, therapies available and kind of ratings and stuff on it. So I think, we're naturally drawn toward kind of software only information focused solutions. But, it does seem that there might be the possibility of sort of empowering or creating sort of a I don't know if the right phrase would be like a network of professionals who could function as that kind of advocate, but they're agnostic to the amount of paperwork or the amount of, the fact that this physician has to go schedule a bunch of surgeries or something, but like they're just like going to be the pusher. They're just going to push through the system. Do you think has anybody built anything like that, or do you feel like that's a good approach, or are there too many challenges or hiccups there?
Yeah, no, it's a great approach, and that's definitely one of my other ideas. So in cancer, there's the concept of care navigators. This hasn't quite spread to other areas yet, but in cancer, you when you have a diagnosis, you generally have a care navigator, and they act as your advocate in a lot of cases. They help you understand your therapy options a little bit better than a time-strapped doctor can help you understand. I think applying that to things like neurology, easy win. I think some other interesting things out there. There are a lot of patient advocates out there, people who are not doctors, but either have the disease or have been affected by the disease. And those people are largely the ones that are pushing forward. They're at the forefront of spreading information about the disease. They're the ones that are helping people navigate the disease. For my mom, there's this great guy that helped us understand what the different doctors in the Bay Area can help with. So like my mom has seen neurologists at UCSF, at Stanford, a couple of private practices at Kaiser. He really helped us navigate that landscape. So like, is there a way we can amplify those people?
Right.
They can take over a lot of the role that a doctor would play, probably better and with more time. That's a huge idea for me. I think another idea I have is...
Just real quick, how do people find like navigators to help them right now? Is it mostly through the hospital or like through private institutions that would offer this, or is there another way of?
Yeah, both. In cancer, there'll be at least one patient advocate group that is specific to your type of cancer, and usually they'll have listings for care navigators. Sometimes the care navigators will come from a place where that would be profitable. So whether that's the hospital assigning you a care navigator, whether that's a pharma company, sometimes will have care navigators available to help you understand their product. All over the place.
Got it. Yeah, so kind of like centralizing that and having more of a like an open field for people to find care navigators specific for their disease or situation could be really helpful, you're thinking.
Yeah, totally. There's like the company Do Not Pay for parking tickets. Like if you really need to have something like that, but like, talk to us when you get your diagnosis. Like don't start any therapies yet. We'll help you understand the whole landscape. It's another idea I have.
Yeah. I wonder what kinds of skills you need to be able to do this, because it does seem like the kind of thing like people get specific training in like nursing or being a physician or maybe being in working in an insurance company or something. There's probably a lot of skills that you get that are sort of on ramps to those roles. Whereas like, what are the sets of skills needed? Because I think you need to understand something about generally how the system works to be a care navigator. And it sounds like from what I'm hearing from you is some of the stuff just comes organically because people have solved it and then they want to sort of give back and contribute to other people who are experiencing that. But that feels like, in a sense, a little like nice organic behavior to observe, but also just a little bit haphazard when it's going to work out. Whereas if you could structure, systematize that to make it available and maybe put some economic levers behind it, maybe even create career paths for that. I wonder if, I think people probably need like understanding of the system and where to push and how to do this, but you don't need to be an expert at any given field of medicine, right? You just really need to be almost like an expert at really like pushing the system to figure out what you need on behalf of a patient.
Yeah, that's a really cool idea. Yeah, the idea of basically building a machine for care navigators to understand the space and operationalizing, every pathway that a patient might need to go through, whether that's expanded access, like here's the handbook for expanded access, or any of the other two dozen things they have to deal with.
Yeah, because like you've kind of done this out of your family relationship, but probably from that, I wonder if you could. Would you be prepared with enough expertise at this point to be able to teach a course, even to just like educate. Let's say I didn't have a brother who was a physician. Could you educate me on how to do that so I could play that role for my family?
Yeah, absolutely. I could talk for hours on the topic. That's a really cool idea.
Because I feel like there's one thing I like about that kind of thing is I think you are already organically doing it, and it doesn't require necessarily like a big complex software system, or you don't have to like really get a certain magic or discoverability to work. You just need to like find a way to take people who already have energy and create like a little bit more structure on that. And it might even be that there's like a new career path, like maybe I don't know, like almost like the thing that Lambda School is actually creates like in a sense a way to train for a new service that you can then provide to a market, and then also happens to have all of the relationships with the buyers of that kind of career skill. And it seems like maybe there's a new like, I don't know, it almost might be like an educational institution that is waiting to be built to both train people in how to do this well, but then also to be the connection point, or even discovery point or marketplace, or I don't know, career services center for such placements.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, almost definitely a successful venture. Yeah. Helping building a business out of helping people navigate the system. I think kind of the question that would first come to my mind is like, do I want to help people navigate the system, or do I want to solve the issues? Like, should the system be this hard to navigate?
I see.
I think the answer there is pretty easy.
So you think the helping people navigate the system, you think wouldn't give you enough leverage on change for the system?
It could. That's a fair point. Yeah, it could. I guess it would depend on what the shortest path is to that change, right? Is the shortest path to changing the incentives, or once this sort of knowledge becomes commodity knowledge, does that mean that we are in a better place to change that? Does that mean there'll be more people that are driven to change that? It's a great question.
Right. Yeah. I'm certainly no expert on the market, so I wouldn't want to pose the strategic positions. But I think if you end up having kind of a frequent interaction with the commercial relationship with a certain set of providers, and you kind of tend to almost like bundle demand for that service, I think you get people listening to you a lot more. So you have like a little bit more maybe strategic, you have the ear of the right people in a sense, which maybe gives you some additional leverage to change it to be like better for everybody involved, if that's ultimately your mission.
Yeah. It's a great way of putting it too. Yeah, I like the idea of bundling that demand for the services that a doctor offers, and then using that as leverage to change it.
I guess some of this stuff must be sort of local in nature. Do you end up working, you mentioned a few Bay Area institutions, do you end up doing all of your focus on Bay Area stuff, or do you look across California, across the US, across the world? How do you think about where to find kind of early kind of success and progress in this?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm focused on the Bay Area just because that's who we talk to with my mom. We lucked out where for my mom's disease, everything's in the Bay Area. The best researchers, the best hospitals, if not the Bay Area, elsewhere in California. So really lucky with that. But yeah, you can imagine your average patient in the middle of Ohio, in rural, Ohio or something, that doesn't have access to that level of care. Like, why is it that they don't have access to the same doctors in this age of telemedicine, in this age of, no borders? But like, there's so many things that still stand in the way of that I would love to solve. Things like doctors need to be licensed in every state that they operate in, even if they're having a Zoom call with a patient in that state.
Wow.
Really, really silly. I think that will probably change very quickly here. I think COVID has been the really driving a lot of change in the industry when it comes to telemedicine. But yeah, why is it that every single patient in the United States can't get 10 minutes with one of the top 5 researchers in the disease that they have? Get the second opinion, get an idea of what care is available to them. I think that'd be really cool.
Yeah. And I wonder if, like, besides those top 5 researchers, there are other people that, if there's like too much of a demand on these top people or whatever, is there some like layer of expertise between the care navigator and that like Stanford neurosurgeon who is like just running around all day long, like people in his lab or like people in just kind of the direct network that could also be kind of mobilized and activated who probably aren't really touching people in the same way right now.
Mm-hmm,
I know, I just
mm-hmm.
think like anecdotally, I had a math professor whose mom was struggling with cancer, and he was like, "I'm just gonna start reading all of these. Just like give me all your research. I'm gonna read it." And he's like finding statistical errors in what they're doing, and like Memorial Sloan Kettering is like altering those studies based on this one guy. And I was just like, "What?" Like, there's probably so many eyeballs that could be useful on like different pieces of this process, and people who might be willing to help, but there's like no sort of like centralized place where they know who is facing what pain and even can like raise their hands and say that I can try to help.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's like legally tricky and stuff though, but I'm sure it would help disseminate a lot of advice at least.
Yeah, it's a really cool idea. Yeah, I mean that kind of goes back to kind of one of the hardest questions that has been difficult for us to answer with my mom. It's like, yeah, what should she be trying in terms of therapies? What will be helpful? What has helped other patients in the past? And my mom has tried dozens of things over the counter, prescription, and every single one of those, N of 1 trials, the data's gone. Like that, nobody will be helped by my mom having done that. Is there a way that we can collect that data and understand it's N of 1, but N of 1 times a million could be helpful?
Right.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with the work that I think, is it Ethan Perlstein? Do you know the work that Ethan has done?
A little bit, yeah. Yeah.
I thought he was working on some
lines.
of the N of 1 trial stuff.
Totally. Yeah. He's working on exactly that. I think his N of 1 stuff is a little bit different in that it's more about creating therapies, like new therapies that are applicable to one person. Kind of the sort of work that our friend Rohan Saith has undergone for his daughter, basically creating a drug that works in one particular person, and then having that be available to more people. That's the stuff that Ethan is working on.
Right. Okay. So you're sort of saying, take the things that are already understood as a possibility and make sure they get connected to the people who could use them versus trying to create new ones that are maybe more custom, which is kind of Ethan's work and kind of what Rohan is doing.
Exactly. Yeah. Kind of the stuff that I'm talking about. Have you guys heard of a YC company called Chronology?
I haven't. No.
So they are a community for Crohn's patients, and founded by a person that was a patient advocate in Crohn's. They got some significant percentage of the Crohn's community on there, and the people on there would self-report what was working for them. And through that, they were able to aggregate enough data that they found that a particular dosage of vitamin B actually significantly helped Crohn's symptoms.
Wow.
And they went on to go from there to like write a white paper on it. And now that's part of the standard of care. Like every doctor will talk to a Crohn's patient and be like, hey, you should be taking vitamin B, like, all because of a website and an app. Like really cool.
Were you talking about them in the past tense? Are they still working on that problem, or they moved on to something else?
It's a good question. I haven't caught up with them in a long time. It sounded like their momentum was stalling a little bit, but to be honest, I'm not sure. Maybe I shouldn't say that.
Sure. I just shared a link to it. Yeah, that looks interesting. Yeah, I wonder how much. I remember back, ages back, there was something, I think it was called dailystrength.org, which was kind of a hub of communities for various diseases. And so people who all had kind of a common reason for gathering would gather and share, whether it's tips, therapies, experiences, whatever, but it was kind of like an open-ended kind of message forum. Do you look at community stuff? Like, how do you look at community stuff relevant to what you want to achieve with standard care?
Yeah, I have a very high interest. I haven't quite figured out how to tackle it yet, but the fact of the matter is so many of the therapies that my mom found were off of forums, and they helped. So many of these discussions currently live in Facebook groups for health conditions. Those are behind a wall, and if you have something like rheumatoid arthritis, unless someone tells you like, hey, there's these groups, and unless you go and you find these groups or someone invites you, there's just such a wealth of knowledge that you'll never have access to.
Right. And are you engaged with any of those around your mother's condition? And is that kind of in the Facebook domain, or are there other ones that you found helpful?
Yeah, there's a few Facebook groups for MSA. Then there's a company called Patients Like Me. That's the most popular forum for MSA patients. So they usually go there and chat. But it's definitely we're definitely in the MySpace world right now of patient health communities, and I think there's the opportunity for a Facebook. I'm not quite sure what that looks like yet.
Is that specific problem one that you would potentially explore, or do you feel like so kind of standard care could end up being something like that, depending on sort of what you learn and figure out along the way?
Yeah, totally. I mean, for me, step one is just to build something that's helpful for patients and use that as a way to amass a patient population. And then I can use that to figure out what they want. And, if that means building towards a community, I would be really psyched to do that. And if that means building, more towards like a prescription as a service or something, that's fine too.
Right. So I'm curious about sort of the process around sort of, what is standard care? So I think, did you mention 2 or 3 years ago was when I think it started bubbling up in your head? And, have you sort of increased your conviction, commitment, engagement over time? And where does that live today? Are you kind of like 100% all in on standard care, but you're not sure exactly which form it'll take? Or are you still sort of like experimenting a little bit with these and like other approaches to the problem? Or how does we just love hearing the story of like the very early days. What does it look like going from, this 3 years ago version of you're experiencing this problem to like today's level of conviction, understanding, and what are the next steps? How does that look?
Yeah, totally. I mean, we're still in the very early days, but 3 years ago was my mom's diagnosis. Over the past 3 years, there's been a lot of me just going like, oh, why is it like this? Why is it like this? And it wasn't until February of this year that I really stopped everything and started to work on it full time. This is it. This is what I'm working on full time. This is what I plan to work on for the foreseeable future. I raised $400K from SPC as part of their founder fellowship. And I'm using that to basically explore a bunch of different ideas, kind of launching really small, easy MVPs, seeing what sticks there. I launched my first one. You guys can see it at standardcare.io. You can search for a particular condition like multiple system atrophy and see what drugs are in trials for that condition right now.
Okay, so actually, we've actually got the ability to screen share. So is that all right if I pull that up?
Yeah, totally.
Let's take a look. Okay, so we'll go to standardcare.io. Can you see my screen now?
Yes. So if you scroll all the way to the bottom, you can see some of our early conditions that we support.
So ALS, lymphoma, multiple sclerosis, MSA. And so if I go to one of these, I'm getting curated results for diseases, particularly promising new therapies. So have you done like the curation of the promising?
Yeah, exactly. So MSA one is actually interesting to look at here. You can see that there's 4 drugs that are in trials right now. One of them is a phase 4 trial, which means this is a drug for another condition that they are trialing here, disease modifying. Then phase 3 verdiperstat is the one I was talking about earlier. That's the one that my mom is trying to get access to under expanded access.
That's the one I was gonna.
Yeah, the phase 1 there's a gene therapy. Gene therapies are a completely new way of tackling some of these neurodegenerative diseases. And so really exciting to see that that's there. And then on the right here, you can see a column of recent updates. This is actually probably the coolest feature of the entire website. You can keep track of every single change that happens to clinical trials under this condition. This is something that's really not possible to do elsewhere.
So it went from recruiting to now active, not recruiting. So were you like crawling this source and you kind of created this metadata change here?
Exactly. Yeah. So I crawl clinicaltrials.gov every single day. I see what's changed and then update it here, which is amazingly the only way to keep abreast of changes. Unless you just have a tab open for every single trial.
Wow. So can people, I noticed there's like this email subscriber. So if people subscribe to this, do they get each of these recent updates in the inbox each day?
Exactly. Yeah, we do a weekly email with all the things that changed that week.
And how do people engage with that email? Are they like replying to it, asking things, or are they sort of using it just for like updates, notifications?
Right now, just for updates. And, obviously we're very new, so there's all of a dozen people that have signed up for updates so far.
Right.
Half of them are my friends. But
Yeah.
it's the idea is, you keep abreast of these changes, and depending on the change, there could be some action. So like if there's a new trial that's recruiting, you might be interested in joining that trial. If there's
Right.
results posted for a trial, that's actually a pretty big deal. I live on clinicaltrials.gov for my mom's condition, and some of these things even I missed. There's one near the bottom where I think it's like 6th or 7th from the bottom. It says a futility trial of sirolimus. That one. Sirolimus was a drug that my mom considered trialing about a year ago, and she decided not to. So it's like actually really interesting to see that drug now has results posted, and it turned out to be futile. It turned out to be not helpful, which is unfortunate, but really interesting data there to keep abreast of what's going on in the MSA landscape.
All right. Wow. So, I wonder if you've got these, maybe you said a dozen people who are in that. If you were to, I don't know, launch some sort of like maybe a Slack or a Discord where those 12 could connect and get the updates and sort of maybe connect with each other. Do you think that kind of stuff would be interesting to help people kind of just further discuss or connect around this?
That's a really interesting idea. Yeah, I have no idea. I should ask them that. These are the people that I'm using as kind of my early user interviews. So it's a great question.
Mm-hmm. Are there people who actually are struggling with the condition, or are there people who are giving you just kind of product feedback? Or
about half of them are probably friends of mine who will give me product feedback, but the other half are strangers. Yeah, I have no idea. They found the site through search engines. They entered their email to sign up for updates. We'll find out once I get to talk to them.
Yeah. That could be cool, because I'm sure they each have like their own web of resources they're tapped into. Like they'll know the Facebook groups for their thing that they're dealing with that probably others don't know. And I don't know, just even on the information side of things that you're like synthesizing and pulling together so much stuff. Like a lot of it is probably just like manually in these people's like Google Sheets or whatever they're using to keep track of their stuff.
Yeah.
So many layers. Yeah.
So you mentioned the South Park Commons Fellowship, and we wanted to kind of talk about that and learn about kind of your experience with that. We're friends with Nadia, who you probably met through the program. And, we're certainly friends with like Avito and some of the other crew over there. But sort of wanted to hear kind of how did you decide the process, and how did you decide kind of to get involved, and what kind of value have you found kind of being part of the community?
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm so psyched to be a part of it. It's so much better than even I expected, which is pretty cool. Yeah, I guess earlier on this year, I was helping Rohan on Clubhouse and decided I wanted to do this. So I kind of spun down all of my commitments, and I was kind of wondering if I should raise money or not, having no real idea, having a lot more questions than answers. And like, frankly, having plenty of runway, like I could have not raised any money and it would have been fine. So I was like leaning towards not raising anything. And then one of my friends sent me the link to SPC announcing the Founder Fellowship. And the way they pitched it really resonated. They pitched it as like a -1 to 0 accelerator. The idea being that, compared to something like YC, which I've also gone through, rather than it being like a set amount of time, rather it being, same milestones for every single type of company. Some companies are going to take longer to explore. Some people are going to have different challenges, whether it's looking for a co-founder, whether it's, dealing with the healthcare system, whether it's understanding SaaS businesses, whatever it is. So it shouldn't be a one-size-fit-all program. But we'll give you enough money that you can take at least 3 or 4 real shots on goal, to figure out what you want to work on, and we'll give you the structure required to get advice. We'll kind of give you the Silicon Valley canon of how to build a startup if you're coming from somewhere else. These are the resources that everyone has been steeped in here for the last decade or so. So there was like a bit of structure and then a bit of explicit non-structure in the program. So far it's been incredible. The caliber of people, I think there's like 16-ish people in the program. The caliber is incredible. We had weekly startup forums with Avichal that have been incredible too. Each week it's a different topic where it could be building your MVP, it could be recruiting teammates, it could be getting your first users, and there's like a deep dive into it where here's your homework. Here, read these 10 things that are written on the topic. Here's a couple of suggested readings for books to read on this exact topic, and then let's get together and let's discuss. Let's answer questions, things like that.
What have been some of the best readings or resources that you've tapped into through that workup?
It's a good question. I am kind of lucky that I've been doing this for so long. I was also one of the older people in the cohort, which is kind of funny for me to say. Because DK, the whole time you've known me, I've been the youngest person in the room.
You've been the kid, yeah.
A lot of these things I had already run across, but I think the most helpful thing is to kind of have them be top of mind while you're doing it. So like Elad Gil's book is absolutely amazing over the last few months. Reading articles around different channels for getting your first users, those have been invaluable. Traction by Gabriel Weinberg has been a really seminal book for me. I think those are kind of the big ones.
Right. When you think about this, do you feel like there are techniques that you observe from the other, I guess there's 16 people in the cohort, so are there things around how they're pursuing their ideas that are kind of formative or informative or kind of structurally help you kind of change course or figure something out faster?
Yeah, I mean, even more than that. Launch this standardcare.io. And my first question, we do every Friday an hour-long workshop with everyone. My first question that was like, how do I get my first users? Like, what should I do? There's so many options. I could be posting these on the MSA Facebook groups. I could be going and talking to the advocacy groups that talk to MSA patients, all of these things. And the thing that came out of it was, maybe just try SEO for a little bit, put a cap on it. This is how I was looking for these sorts of resources, by searching Google. And I started by doing a quick test with search engine ads. So I had never done this before. A guy named James Clift in my cohort, absolute expert at SEO and absolute expert at buying search engine ads, helped literally screen shared and walked me through it. We did a whole trial with a bunch of ads that actually converted pretty well. Like the back of the napkin unit economics kind of work out, which is really exciting to see. I would have never thought of doing that without him.
Meaning if you were to back it into some sort of a paid service, that like the customer acquisition cost would be relatively
exactly. Yeah. So the specific number is the shortest path to making money off of this. I'm not sure if this is the best path, but the shortest path is clinical trial referrals. If you can refer a patient to a clinical trial, the pharma company that's running that trial will pay thousands to tens of thousands of dollars for that referral.
I see.
And our early CAC, with a lot of assumptions, but our early CAC for each patient was something around like $1,850. So back of the napkin, it seems to work out.
Yeah. So meaning you could acquire somebody into, even if it's a community or a forum, and then if only, one in every 100 or so were to convert, you can still kind of make it work over time.
Yeah. So that 1,850 was assuming 1% convert to an actual clinical trial.
So it seems like is there how do you lean heavily into that process then and try to test those assumptions at larger scale and build that initial community, or is that kind of just sort of a data point that you might take into sort of execution mode later? Or how do you think about, because it does seem like that's kind of you mentioned it's near term, but maybe not the best term. So, or kind of maybe not the best way. So what are the kind of the trade-offs or the kind of quality reasons that you might not do that?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's actually probably the top question on my mind right now. I'm trying to answer why don't I just spend 3 months working on growth for this site and see if the numbers still look as good with a larger site? I haven't decided yet. I think the reason not to would be do we want to just be a clinical trial recruitment service? I think the answer to that is no, but is that a stepping stone to kind of the bigger aspirations that we have? I don't know yet. That's got to figure that out soon.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I like about this kind of core idea is you're helping use you're taking a bunch of information that's out there in the world that's like not structured or accessible in quite the right way, and then you're sort of adding just a little bit of structure through your crawl and your deltas, and you're sort of creating structure that people can then like take action on. Oh, I want to learn about this thing that has changed, or this one has been terminated. I want to know that, so that I know not to pursue it. And so it feels like that's like a nice kind of starting point for like you're generating really new information and value in the world that's like too disaggregated and unstructured to be useful. So that already feels like, okay, this is something new. Creating structure like that feels like a promising starting point for helping people in this kind of process or problem. But when I look at the standardcare.io website, it feels like it actually can serve for like a bunch of different cases. And so, if I have MSA, this might not be obvious to me until I scroll down the page that this actually is for me. Whereas like, I wonder if you could take all of the same stuff and reskin it and, make it like msaforme.com or something, where it really feels like it's a hub for MSA focused knowledge and information and drive that. I wonder if that kind of thing would just help you get more crystal clear about what parts of it are useful and working for this particular problem. And then of course there's risk that it doesn't work quite the same way for the other problems. But how much do you think about sort of, in a sense, they might call it like a microsite, or like really focusing on like the one problem, knowing that if you solve that, you could expand to like the other, half dozen or so diseases that you have listed already and kind of maybe further beyond that?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's definitely an existential question. Is it one site that supports a bunch of different diseases, or is it a bunch of different disease sites? And it's definitely a top of mind question. I know Chronology ran into that exact same question as well, and they obviously went really focused on one. The way that I'm thinking about it is I want to start really broad. And so actually standardcare.io works with nearly any disease right now, because all I'm doing is scraping clinicaltrials.gov and generating data off of that. Now that it works for every single disease, I'm kind of focusing down on kind of 13 diseases that we like ranked on 10 different axes, things like the number of patients that are affected by this disease, how promising the pipeline of treatments looks like. And that's what you see, the list of diseases at the bottom there. And so kind of starting to hone down a little bit. I think once we are able to hone down on one or two diseases that seem the most promising for a product like this, I do think we'll go and really focus on those diseases. And I think creating that microsite is a great idea, one way to do that. And then once we've like really done something great in that disease, then once again, expanding out to more diseases.
Right. How do you think about other kinds of content that might be useful here? Because I can imagine, a lot of times when you get involved in like an SEM or SEO focused thing, the more content you can create that's relevant to people, that's like shareable and meaningful, the more that it kind of lowers your effective, economic cost on getting more people, because you have created something of value that they share with other people they know of that have value. So if you figured out like what are those units of media, or what kind of content might be helpful to people that would be, interesting to help share the word?
Yeah, totally. So I have a long list, but the next two things that are coming online soon. One is, you saw the list of drugs. We're going to have news stories for each of those drugs, so you can actually see, what's going on in that drug space beyond just the clinical trial. And then the other thing I mentioned, most people just email the investigator of a trial and ask questions. We want them to do that through this platform. And then we want to take those answers and surface them for future people that are visiting. And that's something that's actually really useful for investigators as well. They get the same question day in, day out. I think they would prefer to answer it on a website once and for all, rather than keep answering it over email.
Right. Have you thought at all about kind of the video format and how getting those investigators connected to the audience via like a video might work?
Oh, that's a great idea. I didn't think about that at all, actually. That would be really cool.
Oh, well, here we are. If we can ever be helpful in helping you make videos for that, let us know, because that's what we do all day.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I hadn't thought of that at all, actually. That's cool.
We kind of started this originally as as kind of a book focused tool, and just found that like when we hosted things with authors and brought audience together, those were just like the most exciting moments. And we found all these, we were using Zoom originally, but we found all these problems to actually producing the videos and clipping the highlights. So we ended up building more of a generalized video creation tool. But yeah, if we can ever be of service to what you're trying to accomplish with media, certainly let us know. We're here to help support and help operate, or whatever we can do. Just super happy to help.
That's awesome. I for sure. I got to ask some PIs if they're willing to get on video and chat about their trial. I think that'd be super cool.
Yeah, that kind of information just doesn't exist anywhere. I feel like it'd be really cool to have it out in the open from like someone actually talking.
Yeah, I think also if you have, one of the things that we've found is we've been fortunate to be able to access some pretty marquee authors, and then when people want to hear from somebody like an Annie Duke or Elad came on and did something, so people then can see, oh, this is a place I can go, and I have some sense of why I can trust that the content here and the information is going to be high quality, is because I know who Annie Duke is, or I know who Elad is. And so it actually helps. I think if your website were to have some of the most important PIs from the field, showcased, kind of talking about the field, answering questions, helping in various ways, and then that media unit lives as part of your website, I think it helps people who arrive understand, oh, this is legit. This is not. They're not just collecting my email and I don't know what they're going to do with it. This is actually probably high quality people behind it, and they're actually here to serve the purpose that they intend.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And I think the people that would be speaking would probably get a fair bit out of it as well. I know most researchers, they are looking for more ways to connect with an audience in a broader way than one-on-one. That's a really cool idea.
Yeah. Is there much of an ecosystem around either MSAs or maybe maybe just kind of the research world around expanded access, where there's is there an ecosystem of media creators on YouTube or maybe in podcasts, or is that already a thing, or do you think there's a reason that doesn't exist?
There's a tiny bit. There's a guy named Craig Lipset who's kind of the expanded access guy, and he gives Clubhouse talks every week. He does YouTube stuff. There's a pharma company that runs an expanded access summit for 3 days every year, and they get every speaker that does anything in the expanded access world. There's a couple of companies that are working on expanded access stuff, basically running expanded access programs for pharma companies. And so they do a lot of publicity to help drive awareness of expanded access. So there's a bit of that kind of nascent. Yeah,
that's cool. Seems like there's the whole web feels like it's going to come alive with these new types of multimedia formats and stuff. So the more that you can sort of be at the front of that and sort of become the hub, I think it helps you build a lot of trust and probably helps your SEM and SEO initiatives and everything kind of gets better when it all compounds like that.
For navigators too, not the PI idea is amazing, I think, but also if you literally just made a video being here's my story, look at all of these Google Sheets and these are my bookmarks, and this is how I've been piecing together these things on the internet that are just so dysfunctionally scattered. Mm-hmm. It would not only help people who are trying to do the same thing, not only for MSA, for anything, I bet they would learn from your research process to be able to immediately take action, but then also make the problem that you're solving for so obvious, and I think gather a lot of momentum around it.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I should do that for sure.
Yeah, I would love to watch that. I think it would just illustrate, it's one thing to read about how the healthcare system is so flawed, but this is just in the flesh, a real person's literal experience. Would be really powerful, I think.
Yeah, that's awesome. Can I do that on Highlighter? I haven't used Highlighter for that sort of stuff.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, you're welcome. Screen sharing too, which I think would be really cool, just to have you sort of narrate, compress weeks in your life, the first month or two of web searching, and just I'm just brainstorming, but show people what that was like. Mm-hmm. Or something like that. And you could bring people and have an audience, or just make a video, whatever. Yeah,
that's a cool idea.
Yeah, if you ever want to play with any of the ideas, let us know, because we can help you get set up with it, or we also offer, sometimes we just we help operate the show if you need some help, because there's sometimes like more logistical stuff, or if you want help, you want a foil as an on-air personality, so that we can just like ask you about stuff. You can sort of tell us the general structure of what you want to go through, and we can, just kind of be an on-air personality to ask you questions and walk you through, whatever kind of key messages you want to cover.
Yeah, that's such a good idea. That's so awesome. I didn't know you guys were doing that.
Yeah. Yeah, we would love to do that. I think it'd be such high value for everyone out there.
Yeah. That's awesome. Thank you for offering. That's really nice.
Yeah,
totally.
Cool. Well, I know we're already like way over time. It's been fun to catch up and hear all about kind of what you're working on and the process and how you came to it. And it's I'm excited to see sort of where this goes. I think this is like a good, I think you seem to have like a really good focus on service, which I think is not, I think some people miss the real purpose of this thing. And I definitely get that you understand this problem deeply and you really care about like the service side of like really helping people. So, it gives me a lot of optimism for like what you can discover when you come in with such like such service motivation. So thanks for sharing with us.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for saying that. That actually means a lot, because definitely getting into healthcare as a newbie, there's so many opportunities to be another company that, skims 1% off the top of every transaction here or there. And it's really tempting and hard to avoid those situations and keep an eye on the end goal here. So I really appreciate you saying that.
Sure. Great. Well, thanks for joining, Zain.
Yeah. Thank you guys.
Okay. We'll catch you soon.
Talk soon.
Bye.